Obviously, there's families that are not in a position to step outside of the public school system. But what we're seeing is there's more and more coercion, indoctrination. What I've spoken out and said is that it seems like the masking, it's not scientific. We know that, cloth masks are not effective, right?
Right.
And so it seems like it's more about compliance. And if a kid is year after year taught to cover their face, to do things that don't make any scientific sense, to not worry about critical thinking, then I think that we could lose freedom in this country within a generation, because the next generation, if they don't even understand what freedom is, they don't understand the Constitution or their rights, we're not going to be living in the same country just based on that within a generation.
Well, hey, everybody, welcome to Our Watch. I am Tim Thompson, and I am grateful to be here today with Sharon McKeeman. She is the founder and the CEO of Let Them Breathe, also a candidate for school board in San Diego, Carlsbad District 1. Grateful to have you on the program today. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on.
Of course, I'm grateful for what you're doing down there in San Diego County, and of course, that's going to have ramifications for the entire state of California. We need people like you pushing back against what's happening and standing up for what's true and right and good, and we're grateful for that. You've got a lot of different things going on. Before we get into the very specific details, just with a broad brush, if you would, for my audience, if they don't know about Let Them Breathe, most of them do, but for the ones that don't, what is Let Them Breathe, and how did you get that started?
Yes, so I was part of the school reopening movement. I was part of the lawsuit that successfully reopened California schools. But once my kids were back in school, it was apparent they weren't back to an effective education because of the forced masking. So I founded Let Them Breathe. We sued the state. We sued the governor. We sued CDPH to try to get the masks off our kids' faces. And we also started a lot of great dialogue and collaboration with school boards. We proved that schools didn't have to be excluding students. We helped, private schools and charter schools stand up and do the right thing. And we worked with parents just through our advocacy resources, our legal action, our collaboration, to help in the state mask mandate. And unfortunately now San Diego Unified is re-implementing a mask mandate. So we just sent them a legal demand letter yesterday. We've helped parents put in thousands of phone calls and emails. And then we also have been taking a stand against these vaccine mandates that are discriminating and segregating students. So we beat San Diego Unified's vaccine mandate in court. We are, contributing with the lawsuit that was just won in LA Unified, and we should be hearing our ruling against Granada Hills, a new West vaccine mandate, this week. Then we had several others that we sent a demand letter, or like Palisades. The minute we filed the lawsuit, they just dropped their vaccine mandate. So some of them have been a little bit longer battles, and some have been quick successes. But basically, we're just taking a stand against these unlawful mandates. And at the same time, we are just empowering families with alternative education options, because I have a background in really every type of education, public, private, alternative, and parents need a lot of options at this point. There's some that don't really have an option other than the public school. There's many that have already pulled their kids. They're really unhappy with the way the public school system is going. But what is most important is that we all come together, that everyone knows they're not alone. We build a network, and we're able to dialogue with each other.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying as far as giving those alternative options. You know, the thing is, I consistently say this, it's not enough to just say you shouldn't have your kids in public school. You know, I think that public school needs a drastic change. I don't even call it public school now. I call it government-ran schools. I've been saying this for a long time. There's a drastic need for change. We need people like you to step up, run for school board, and bring that change about. But until that change happens, you have to offer to people alternatives. And I think that's very important. You look at what's going on. You know, I'm looking at what Disney's doing. You can't just say, well, stop watching Disney because they're indoctrinating your kids. You have to have something else for your kids to have some sort of entertainment. And that's the problem, is there's not a lot of alternatives when it comes to to educating our children, however, there are quite a few alternatives. I think it's important to get those tools into the hands of parents. And I think it's also important to be pushing back. You said you brought a lawsuit against the school board or school district in San Diego. Tell us a little bit more about that, if you would.
Yes, so we sued San Diego Unified over their vaccine mandate, and the judge agreed with us that although local school districts can have their own policies, they can't conflict with state law and violate students' rights. So San Diego Unified was going to force all kids to either get the shot or leave school by January 24th of this past school year. And we were able to keep them in school all year. As it stands, there's no vaccine mandate, thanks to our lawsuit. But we are having to continue to raise support because the San Diego Unified is wasting taxpayer dollars trying to appeal this sound legal decision. And so we're having to continue the legal efforts to make sure that we're able to prevail on appeal.
So it's interesting when you look at what they're doing, trying to appeal this and trying to continue to force this, even though most of the studies that are coming out now are showing that it's actually not beneficial. It's not doing what they said it would do originally. Even Dr. Fauci is saying that now. Of course, we've got many of the world leaders, our president included, who have been, they've gotten the jab, they've gotten the second booster, third booster, they keep getting the boosters, and yet they're still getting sick. And, we're seeing all these adverse reactions, and it's really proven to be very unhealthy for many people. And yet they're doubling down. They lost, and now they're appealing it, and they're really trying to make sure they can enforce this. I'm glad you're bringing that lawsuit. And how can people, if they want to support that, how can they get involved in supporting it?
They can just go to letthembreathe.net and click the donate button. Any amount is helpful, and they can know that they are on the right side of history, and they are really making a huge impact if they support that. Because San Diego Unified, we've seen, is often the front runner for bad policy, and if we don't stop them there, it spreads. I think that's the transmission that families are really worried about. We know our kids are at low risk from this virus. They're worried about the spread of these mandates again, and so if people are supporting, they're holding the line against both the vaccine mandate and now the mask mandate that San Diego Unified is trying to re-implement. And as we heard from the board president, she was all over the news. I was all over the news the past week. It was like the debate of the Sharons. I'm saying our kids have a right to be in school. And she's saying, well, if they don't want to wear a mask, they can just go home and not return to school. And we know that Zoom school is a failure. Homeschool is different, right? Homeschool, a hybrid program that's well thought out. Like you said, there are other options. But what San Diego Unified is offering kids as far as Zoom school, I'm hearing from parents that there's kids with IEPs that are basically just being told, go home since you won't wear a mask, and they are not being given any instruction at all. They're just basically being kicked out of their summer programs. And so we have also invited them into, we have a little learning center. We've invited them into that. I just yesterday had a kid, he's got an IEP. He was in summer school at San Diego Unified for, support with learning challenges he has, was kicked out because he wouldn't mask. And then he was in our learning center yesterday. I taught him how to design and sew his own shirt. So, we're working on learning skills and also sustainability. And it's just like the complete opposite of, we're not afraid to be with these kids. We're grateful that we have that opportunity. He had the biggest smile. I don't know how anybody could cover that smile, and that just brings us back to the vaccine mandate. I don't know how anyone could force an injection that doesn't have long-term studies on students that are at low risk and say if they don't get it, they can't come back. And that's why we've been so motivated to take the legal action. And again, it's as simple as somebody can just go to letthembreathe.net, click donate, whatever amount works for them, and know that they're making a huge impact doing the right things for these kiddos.
Talk to me more about the Lesson Learned initiative. What's going on with that?
Yes. So we have a Let Them Learn initiative. And, like you said, there's so many alternatives out there. And obviously there's families that are not in a position to step outside of the public school system. But what we're seeing is there's more and more coercion, indoctrination. what I've spoken out and said is that it seems like the masking, it's not scientific. We know that, cloth masks are not effective, right?
Right.
And so it seems like it's more about compliance. And if a kid is year after year taught to cover their face, to do things that don't make any scientific sense, to not worry about critical thinking, then I think that we could lose freedom in this country within a generation, because the next generation, if they don't even understand what freedom is, they don't understand the Constitution or their rights, we're not going to be living in the same country just based on that within a generation.
Right.
And so Let Them Learn is about filling the holes that are in the alternative education system and creating a network, because as you know, when the internet came on the scene, for a brief period of time, it was like, okay, this is weird. What is this? Where's this going? And then it just spread so rapidly that it revolutionized our lives. It changed how everything is done. And so we're not trying to do away with the public school system. We're trying to make it better, because when there's competition, things have to get better.
Right.
If the public school system is the only option, then, they hold our tax dollars hostage and they can provide a very poor education. But if there's thriving alternative education, then the public school system will have to get better, or it will be defunded, right? Because everyone will just leave en masse. And then also people that are in, part of alternative education. I was for over a decade. I was a public school teacher. I've owned an online private school. I have home educated my kids for over a decade through a charter school. One thing I learned is that there are a lot of holes and there's a lot of isolation that goes on. And I think more the isolation is felt on the parents, right? There's tons of social things for kids to do. But when a parent steps into alternative education, it can feel very daunting. They have to wear so many hats: principal, teacher, mom, dad, all of these different things, a social coordinator, counselor. And so even though there's great support systems, we're, just trying to help people become even more connected. We're going to have, curriculum and enrichment and electives and just a whole lot of incredible things that I'm excited to showcase even more. But people can go to letthemlearn.net and find out about that initiative. And we also have a alternative education conference right now. It's scheduled for August 6th. And we'll have some more info coming out about that. But again, it's about connecting what is already out there and then filling some of those holes that I know are there, because I've been part of alternative education for a while now.
So yeah, being a part of alternative education, you've got a good insight into what's going on, not just in public schools, but also in any of the alternative methods of educating our children. Now you're running for school board and wanting to help affect change there in Carlsbad. Tell us about your run for school board. Don't tell me who you're running against, but just tell me the ideals you're running against. I don't care about the person's name. I care about your name. So you're running. What is it that you're running against, and what are you running for?
Yes, I am so excited to be running for Carlsbad School Board District 1. And, my kids are in the Carlsbad public schools currently. Like I said, we were part of a charter school for a long time. I actually put my kids into public school because one of them needed some extra academic support and one of them was very into sports. And I'll have to say, I had pretty much the worst experience you could have in public schools, because I put my kids in and literally they shut down for COVID the next week.
Oh.
And so that's part of why I was so motivated to reopen schools, to get these masks off kids' faces. And I also knew that I would step up to run for school board because we've just seen really poor leadership. And I think that was exemplified with the board president of San Diego Unified, again, saying, well, if kids don't want to wear masks, they just don't have to return to school. And so I'm running as a parent to step up and be the school board, because I'm tired of talking at school boards that aren't listening and aren't doing the right thing for our kids. And I've collaborated with school boards throughout the state, trustees that want to do the right thing. So I know how to work with trustees for students. But at the same time, any school board trustee that's not doing the right thing for students or that's catering to union interests, it's time for them to step down and someone else to step up. So I'm running to put students first, because their education or their schools should be about education, not about the politics we've seen for the past several years. And I'm also running to serve families because the family unit should be honored. We're seeing way too much division caused by the state and caused even by specific school policies or curriculum. And there shouldn't be division inserted in the family unit. The unit as a whole should be honored because the parents are the ones that elect the school board, and the parents are the one working to pay those property taxes. And so their concerns, their desires for their families should be honored by the school's policies. And then third, I'll just say I think there's really a need for fiscal responsibility. A lot of parents are wondering where those COVID dollars went. And you know, even before COVID, we're seeing here in California, I know specifically in my school district, but really throughout the state, the funding, not just for academics, but for the arts is abysmal. Our kids should be getting, you know, just the absolute best preparation that they can to not just survive, but thrive in a generation that's very uncertain. They're going to have challenges that you and I didn't have to deal with growing up. And so they need to have funding for excellence in education, both in academics, athletics, and the arts. You know, I was also part of Let Them Play. It was ridiculous that our kids were kept from playing sports for any period of time. And here locally, the PTA has to raise funds for the arts. Our choir teacher was let go. But there's literally barely any, if no, funding for the arts here. And it's so important to kids, their critical thinking, their emotional well-being. So that's it kind of in a nutshell. As you can tell, I love education. And so I love to dialogue with people. I'm, you know, I would invite anyone to reach out to me. My website for the school board candidacy is Sharon for carlsbadschools.com. And just one other thing that's really neat is that we've had tons of national attention on it because I've spoken out against these mandates and then at the same time said, I'm not just complaining. I'm not just filing lawsuits. I'm stepping up to fix things and to serve in this way. And I think that ultimately we're all used to a lot of time and effort and money being poured into the higher on the ballot races. But I think what is really going to turn our nation around and our local communities around are these local races because they're winnable. And if we win the city council and the school board and even the board of supervisor races en masse, then once our school boards, once our city councils have different leadership, here in California, Sacramento, we'll have to start behaving differently. And I really think that we could see this in this midterms happen nationwide. And when our local leadership is different, excuse me, our state and our federal leadership will have to start focusing on policies that, you know, do the right thing for students and do the right thing for the family unit as a whole.
I appreciate everything you're saying. We only have a few minutes left, and there's a few other issues I know that my audience is concerned with. You already hit the nail on the head when it comes to parental rights. Sounds like you're solid with that. A few other issues, we look at the critical race theory, the idea of pitting our students against one another based on the color of their skin, judging people on that instead of the content of their character. Where do you stand on that issue? Also, the issue of the sexual indoctrination, adults talking to children about their sexual preferences and really having any kind of conversation about sexual desires with children. Those are two other big topics. And lastly, the idea of school resource officers on campus and creating an environment of safety for the children, an environment where law enforcement is respected. Where do you stand on those issues?
Wow, that's a lot of good stuff to talk about. So for one, I will say that when we use the word critical in our schools, what we should be focusing on is critical thinking. And that is not being taught right now, right? We should be focusing on critical thinking skills. Curriculum shouldn't be pushed into extreme agendas or divisive narratives. Instead, we should be refocusing on what children used to learn, which was a classical education where they actually read history, right? Real history, not, I don't know if you've read 1984. I'm sure you probably have, but right? not things where, not revisionist history or where words and narratives are getting shifted, but the actual history. And once the kid knows the actual history and they go through Socratic seminars, they go through, the process of digesting what they've read, dialoguing about it, writing it out and forming their own opinions, you've got a student that is not going to be susceptible to these other divisive narratives, but is instead able to understand what's happened in this country, in this world, make their own decisions, and be able to obviously articulate that the color of someone's skin doesn't determine, their behavior, whether we're going to be friends or not. And just, I'm hearing from so many families, so many students that they just want there to be less division, and they want, the respect, the sharing of smiles. I mean, for goodness sakes, what could be more divisive than saying that we can't even share our smiles with each other, right?
Right.
And then
we got 1 minute left. We got 1 minute left. I'm sorry. So
ideology.
Yes.
I think there's a lot of people pulling their kids, even if these mandates are leaving, because they don't want, this confusing stuff with gender ideology being pushed on their kids in the public school system. And then finally, our schools need to be safe. Again, we've been told wear a mask to stay safe, but then there's other issues of safety that are being ignored. And absolutely, our kids, when they show up to school in the morning, and our teachers too, they need to know that they're going to be happy and safe at the end of the day.
Amen to that. So Sharon McKeeman, thank you so much for joining us today. Wish you the best of luck on your campaign, and really, I think that'd be a blessing for the people of Carlsbad. So we'll continue to keep in touch with you and see how your run is going. And again, all of our audience, we want them to connect with you. You said it's letthembreathe.net, correct?
Yes, letthembreathe.net. And then the candidacy is Sharon, 4, carlsbadschools.com.
We'll put all that in the comment section so that way people can connect with you. So thank you so much for being here, Sharon. We'll get with you in the future. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. Glad you were here with us on Our Watch. We'll see you next time.